Cast with the March meeting held by the students of Mugun to support the president of Faso. The Mugun section of the Burkina Students' League organized a March meeting in Dedougou this Wednesday, December 10th, with the aim of showing their support to the president of Faso, his government, and the fighting forces.
Something unusual happened in western Burkina Faso, and it did not involve soldiers, gunfire, or politics as the world usually frames it. Instead, it involved students, thousands of them. College and high school students poured into the streets of Bobo Dioulasso, not to protest, not to riot, not to demand change, but to say thank you. That alone should make you pause. In a region where youth movements are often driven by anger, this one was driven by gratitude. At the center of it all is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's young leader, whose education reforms have quietly reshaped how students experience school, time, and opportunity. Academic calendars that once collapsed are being restored. Schooling that once excluded the poor is being opened. Skills that once led nowhere are being redirected toward real work. But why would students rally for a government, and what exactly changed to trigger this moment? Let's find that out. It started quietly, the way most real political moments do, not with a government announcement, not with a press release, not with foreign media crews flying in. Early in the morning, students began gathering in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso's second-largest city. High school students in uniforms, college students carrying notebooks instead of placards. Some came in groups from campuses, others walked in from nearby neighborhoods. There was no luxury stage, no expensive branding, no celebrity endorsements, just thousands of young people moving toward the same place for the same reason. By midday, it was impossible to ignore. The crowd had grown into the thousands. Chants echoed through the streets, not angry, not chaotic, but focused. It can only work if we, the youths, are with you, and we are with you. That line kept repeating, over and over, like a statement rather than a slogan. This wasn't a protest against something. It was an expression of alignment. What made the scene striking wasn't just the numbers, it was who was there. Teenagers who had only known disrupted school calendars. University students who had watched older siblings wait years for delayed degrees. Young people who, for decades, were told education was the path out of poverty, only to discover that the system itself was broken. And yet here they were, publicly backing a military leader, something that would confuse most outsiders if they only looked at headlines. There were no signs demanding foreign aid, no calls for NGO intervention, no placards quoting Western development language. Instead, students spoke about something painfully practical. School calendars finally making sense again. Exams are happening on time. Courses finishing when they were supposed to. Infrastructure is slowly improving instead of collapsing. For the first time in years, students could plan their lives without guessing whether the academic year would stretch endlessly into the future. Speakers took turns addressing the crowd. They talked about free education from nursery to university, a policy that, until recently, sounded unrealistic in one of the world's poorest countries. They talked about vocational training being introduced early, so students weren't forced into overcrowded universities with degrees that led nowhere. They talked about dignity, not as an abstract word, but as the ability to graduate, work, and contribute without begging the world for permission. What shocked many observers later wasn't that the rally happened, but that it felt organic. No visible coercion, no security forcing attendance, no buses dropping people off for staged photos. The energy came from the crowd itself. Young people cheered not because they were told to, but because they recognized their own experiences reflected in recent changes. For a country long described as unstable, poor, and dependent, this moment cut against the usual narrative. It raised an uncomfortable question for critics abroad and elites at home alike. If students, the group most affected by broken systems, were openly supporting these reforms, then something deeper was happening beneath the surface. So what exactly changed in Burkina Faso's education system that pushed thousands of students to leave their classrooms and rally in the streets, and why did it matter so much to them? What changed was not a slogan, not a speech, and not a promise for the future. What changed was the daily reality of being a student in Burkina Faso. For years, students lived with broken academic calendars. A school year that was supposed to last 9 months could stretch into 2 years. Exams were delayed. Results came late. Graduations meant nothing because universities were overcrowded, underfunded, and disconnected from real jobs. Many students finished secondary school only to sit at home, waiting, drifting, slowly realizing their education had no clear path forward. That frustration built quietly across cities like Bobo Dioulasso. Under Ibrahim Traoré, the first shift was brutal in its simplicity. Normalize the academic calendar. Schools were ordered to function on time. Exams were scheduled and enforced. By official figures repeatedly cited in local reporting, academic normalization reached close to 90%. That may sound technical, but for students, it meant something deeply personal. Predictability. You knew when you would graduate. You knew when your results would come. You could plan your life instead of being trapped in limbo. Then came the cost. Education from nursery to university was made free in public institutions. Not subsidized, not assisted, free. For families in Western Burkina Faso, that single move removed a barrier that quietly killed dreams every year. Students who would have dropped out stayed. Those who never imagined a university suddenly saw a door open. But the most radical change came next, and it is the one outsiders often miss. Traoré's reforms did not treat education as a pipeline to white-collar fantasies. Instead, vocational training was pulled forward into secondary school. Agriculture, mechanics, technical trades, and industrial skills were no longer presented as failures or backups. They became part of the core curriculum. The message was clear. The country needs builders, producers, and skilled workers, not just certificate holders waiting for office jobs that do not exist. At the university level, pressure was relieved by opening public universities to holders of professional baccalaureates starting in the 2025 to 2026 cycle, even as new infrastructure continued to rise. This was not symbolic. It was damage control for a system that had been collapsing under its own weight for decades. Students understood what this meant before analysts did. It meant fewer dead years, fewer wasted diplomas. Fewer young people are forced into unemployment, not because they were lazy, but because the system had no place for them. That is why the rally mattered. It was not blind loyalty, it was recognition. Students were reacting to a rare experience in African politics, a government touching the part of their lives that hurts the most and actually fixing it. But reforms on paper are one thing. Turning education into a tool for national identity and discipline is something else entirely. And that is where the story takes a sharper, more controversial turn. So why did Traoré go beyond free schooling and skills training and introduce something called patriotic immersion into the education system? The energy on the streets of Bobo Dioulasso did not come from slogans alone. It came from something students could feel inside their daily lives. For years, education in Burkina Faso followed a familiar African crisis pattern. Overcrowded classrooms, broken calendars, endless strikes, delayed exams, and degrees that arrived late or not at all. Many students spent more time waiting than learning. Parents lost faith, the youth lost direction. The system quietly produced frustration instead of futures. That is the reality Ibrahim Traoré targeted first. One of the most disruptive changes was restoring order to the academic calendar. Before his reforms, school years regularly collapsed into chaos, with delays stretching semesters into years. Under the new policy drive, authorities pushed institutions to stabilize schedules, reaching roughly 90% normalization across many levels. That number may sound technical, but for students, it meant something concrete: graduating on time, sitting exams as planned, and moving forward instead of being stuck in limbo. Then came the question of access. Traoré's administration expanded free education from nursery school all the way to university. This was not symbolic. In a country where many families survive on agriculture or informal labor, school fees, even small ones, have been silent barriers. Removing them pulled thousands of children back into classrooms and allowed older students to continue instead of dropping out to work. But the most radical shift happened at the secondary and post-secondary level. Burkina Faso's universities had become overcrowded warehouses of theory, producing graduates with degrees but no path into work. The reforms attacked that mismatch directly. Vocational and technical courses were introduced earlier, inside secondary schools, so students could develop practical skills before reaching university age. This was not about lowering standards. It was about aligning education with reality. Students could now train in agriculture, mechanics, construction, and technical trades while still studying general subjects. For a country rebuilding itself, this mattered. Burkina Faso does not just need philosophers and lawyers, it needs builders, engineers, technicians, and skilled workers who can immediately contribute to national projects. At the university level, another quiet revolution unfolded. Public universities opened their doors to professional baccalaureate holders, students trained in applied fields. During the 2025 to 2026 period, even as new infrastructure was still under construction. This decision relieved pressure on overcrowded campuses, while signaling that vocational paths were not second-class options, but legitimate routes to higher education. There was also a deeper layer beneath the policies: patriotic immersion programs for students who passed key national exams. These programs aimed to reconnect youth with national service, discipline, and responsibility, not through slogans, but through lived experience. Education was no longer just about personal success. It was being reframed as national participation. By the time students marched in Bobo Dioulasso, they were not celebrating promises. They were reacting to changes they could touch, measure, and feel. Their support was not abstract loyalty. It was recognition. But if education was being reshaped this deeply, then the real question becomes uncomfortable for many outside Burkina Faso. Why did no one expect students to defend these reforms so loudly? And who benefits from pretending this transformation isn't happening? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. The reason students did not need slogans handed to them or organizers to convince them is simple. The change under Traoré did not stay on paper. It walked straight into their classrooms. For years, Burkina Faso's education system suffered from a quiet crisis that rarely made international headlines. Academic calendars were broken. A school year could stretch endlessly because of strikes, budget delays, or administrative paralysis. Students spent years waiting to graduate, watching their youth slip away while unemployment waited on the other side. What Traoré's government did first was brutally practical. It forced the system to run on time. By stabilizing funding, disciplining bureaucratic delays, and prioritizing education as a national security issue, the academic calendar was normalized to nearly 90% consistency. That alone changed daily life for millions of students. But fixing the calendar was only the surface. Inside classrooms, the curriculum itself began to shift. Secondary schools started introducing vocational pathways earlier, not as a downgrade, but as an equal route. Students learned mechanics, agriculture, construction, electronics, and industrial skills alongside academic subjects. This mattered because Burkina Faso does not need millions of unemployed theorists. It needs builders, technicians, farmers, engineers, and problem solvers who can keep the country alive under pressure. Universities, once choked by overcrowding and mismatched degrees, were gradually opened to professional baccalaureate holders, easing pressure while aligning education with real economic demand. Infrastructure followed policy. New classrooms were built, old facilities renovated, and university construction projects accelerated. The point was not cosmetic modernization, but capacity. More students could attend, more programs could run. Fewer young people were locked out simply because there was no space. And then came the decision that surprised even supporters: free education from nursery to university. In a country under sanctions, fighting insurgency, and cut off from many foreign funding streams, this was a direct statement of priorities. Education was no longer a privilege or a future promise, it was a present right. Students noticed another change that was less visible but deeply felt: respect. Patriotic immersion programs for exam passers were introduced not as propaganda camps, but as civic grounding. Students learned national history, discipline, community service, and responsibility. Many returned saying it was the first time the state treated them as future custodians of the nation, rather than problems to manage. That emotional shift matters. Young people fight harder for systems that recognize them. This is why the rally in Bobo Dioulasso felt different. It was not gratitude for speeches. It was recognition of cause and effect. Students could trace a straight line from policy to their own lives. Fewer delays, lower costs, clearer futures, skills that meant something, a system that moved instead of stalling. When youth feel momentum, loyalty follows naturally. So if these reforms were already reshaping classrooms, calendars, and confidence, what larger political meaning did this youth rally carry for Burkina Faso's future? And why did it unsettle critics so deeply? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The answer is simple, but uncomfortable for many outside Burkina Faso. Education stops producing spectators and starts producing actors. What unfolded in Bobo Dioulasso was not just a thank you rally. It was the visible result of a deeper shift. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré pushed for free education from nursery to university, when he forced academic calendars back into order, when he tied schooling directly to national needs in agriculture, mechanics, construction, and industry, he quietly rewired how young people see their place in the country. For decades, education in Burkina Faso, like in much of Africa, followed a broken promise. Study hard, get a degree, wait. Wait for a job that never comes. Wait for connections you don't have. Wait for a system that is not built for you. That waiting produced frustration, migration, and in some cases recruitment by armed groups who offered purpose where the state did not. Traoré attacked that cycle head-on. By integrating vocational tracks early in secondary education, students no longer see skills training as failure. Welding, electrical work, agriculture technology, and mechanics are no longer backups. They are national priorities. Universities opening their doors to professional baccalaureate holders is not an administrative tweak. It is a declaration that intelligence is not only academic, and contribution is not only theoretical. This is why youth unemployment is central to these reforms, not as a statistic but as a security issue. A young person with skills, dignity, and a role in national production is far harder to radicalize, manipulate, or discard. Education here becomes a form of defense, quieter than soldiers, but longer lasting. Mandatory patriotic immersion for exam passers reinforces that idea. It is not about indoctrination. It is about grounding achievement in responsibility. You don't just pass exams for yourself. You pass them for the country that paid for your education, protected your schools, and chose to invest in you during a crisis. This is also why the rally matters. You do not chant loyalty slogans for someone who gave you speeches. You chant them for someone who changed your daily reality. Shorter delays, clear calendars, open campuses, new buildings are under construction while war still rages in parts of the country. These are not abstract policies. They are felt immediately. And this is where the story becomes dangerous, not for Burkina Faso, but for old narratives. Because when students defend a leader not with fear, but with gratitude, when they organize themselves without coercion, when education produces confidence instead of dependency, it challenges a long-standing assumption that African youth must be saved from their governments rather than empowered by them. What Bobo Dioulasso showed is that when education becomes a weapon of sovereignty instead of a tool of delay, the youth do not wait for permission to believe in their country. They show up and say it out loud. And that leaves one final, unavoidable question. If Burkina Faso's youth are no longer waiting, no longer fleeing, and no longer silent, what does that mean for a system that depended on them staying exactly that way? The answer is that applause alone has never been enough to change a country. What determines whether this moment becomes history or just noise is what happens after the rallies end, and students return to classrooms that are still being built, staffed, and reorganized. Bobo Dioulasso's student mobilization matters not because it looked impressive, but because it revealed something rare in modern politics: alignment between youth expectations and state direction. For decades, Burkinabe students were trained to escape unemployment, escape underfunded universities, escape a system that educated them for nothing. What Traoré's reforms attempt is the opposite. They are designed to root students inside the country's future, not push them outward. But this is where the real test begins. Free education from nursery to university is not just a moral promise, it is a logistical gamble. Classrooms must keep pace with enrollment. Teachers must be trained and paid. Vocational tracks must lead to real jobs, not certificates that gather dust. If these links break, hope turns quickly into frustration, especially among the youth who were loudest in their support. There is also resistance, quiet but real. University bureaucracies accustomed to delay are being forced to move faster. Elites who benefited from scarcity are uncomfortable with mass access. Foreign observers who prefer African youth as protest symbols rather than nation builders have already begun reframing these rallies as cult-like or manufactured. That narrative will intensify the more these reforms succeed. Yet what makes this moment different is that the students themselves seem aware of the stakes. Their slogans were not demands for comfort. They were pledges of responsibility. They did not ask the state to save them. They signaled readiness to participate through patriotic immersion, vocational labor, and acceptance that national rebuilding requires discipline, not shortcuts. The reforms are also deliberately timed. Opening public universities to professional baccalaureate holders in 2025 to 2026 is not symbolic. It is a pressure release valve. It prevents overcrowding while redirecting talent into sectors Burkina Faso actually needs: agriculture, construction, processing, mechanics, and local industry. This is education designed around survival, not prestige. Still, no reform is immune to fatigue. Security pressures remain. Resources are finite. The longer the transformation takes, the louder doubts will become. That is why these student rallies are not the climax of the story. They are the opening act. They create political space, not guaranteed outcomes. What happens next depends on whether classrooms remain open, calendars stay normalized, vocational paths lead to income, and the state continues choosing structure over spectacle. If that chain holds, historians may one day point to Bobo Dioulasso not as a protest, but as the moment Burkina Faso's youth stopped waiting for the future and decided to build it. But the question that now hangs over everything is this: can this rare unity between students and state survive long enough to turn reform into an irreversible reality? Let us know in the comment section. Is Burkina Faso changing, or has it changed? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.